Broadcasting live from our studio in Boston, Solutions Review is proud to showcase FlowForma in the Solution Spotlight, an exclusive webinar event.
I'm Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review, and welcome to a Solutions Spotlight live event, where we highlight a priority challenge facing businesses today and take a closer look at how a leading solution provider is solving the problem. Today, we're focused on process automation, specifically how key processes need digitizing by key people. And in our solution spotlight is FlowForma. FlowForma is a leading solution provider of enterprise-class no-code process automation tools that empower business people to rapidly digitize a wide range of processes. And we are joined by Paul Stone, product strategist at FlowForma. Paul, thanks for being with us.
Hi, Doug. I'm pleased to be here.
Well, I'm glad you're here because we have a lot to cover. I know you're an expert and have seen a lot of problems, come up with a lot of solutions, and you're going to dig in specifically on answering some of that for us, and also how the FlowForma solution tackles those problems. By way of an agenda, effectively, we're going to talk about the problem initially, take a deeper dive down into how FlowForma is addressing that problem, and then talk specifically about some examples that you've seen of how companies have solved their process automation challenges. And then we're going to get an inside look at the FlowForma technology, and you're going to give us a demo live at the end, and then we'll come back with some questions, and we'll even have a couple polls in the middle. So lots to go over, lots to cover. Take me through the challenge. So let's get into it. Actually, I think you probably have a few slides you can share with us. Let's talk about what is facing companies today with regard to process automation.
Yeah, let me show you some slides that will help us guide us through this. Let me just do that right now. So yeah, absolutely. So we're talking today about the key processes need digitizing by key people, and how to meet the digitization needs of today. And that's certainly something that we've seen come up again and again, that processes really need to be digitized to help boost productivity. It's a little bit of an age-old problem that every company wants to be more productive. They want to be more competitive, but that's really been highlighted in these times of the pandemic, where everybody is remote working. They're having to adapt, they're having to change, they're having to organize the way they work much more efficiently. So it's been a real driver for automation in the business. And the people have faced some real challenges in terms of how they actually going to modify their operations and digitize processes when their IT department is overburdened by dealing with the whole remote productivity infrastructure they have to put into place. So how do you reduce the dependency on IT? How do you improve your customer experience during these difficult times? At the same time, the world is becoming ever more regulated. So how do you improve your compliance and reduce costs, keep them under control during these difficult times when you go through that digital transformation exercise, moving towards digital processes?
Well, so let's get into what are facing business developers these days. So, how are you really, who are you solving this problem for, and how are you helping them get down to it? I mean, really, what is FlowForma's solution really getting to?
Yeah, well, we're focused very much on providing a solution that business developers, the business can take control, develop solutions themselves without that dependency on IT. The company itself, we've been around since 2013. We've got over 200,000 people across the world using FlowForma. And we're seen really as being, revolutionizing the BPM space. Traditionally, BPM, it was a complex product that required lots of specialist skills to configure processes and demonstrate returns and so on. And really took a long time to implement and required a lot of money and investment up front as well. But we've turned that on its head. We've said, okay, well, don't use the specialist resources with the technical skills. Look at your specialist resources with the business skills and get those guys to configure those solutions. And we're globally recognized as being somebody that offers something a little bit different. We take a different approach. And we've been recognized by Forrester in their waves. We've been awarded by Microsoft for our user interface. And we have global customers and throughout the world using our solution right now.
Well, and this is something that we're seeing across the board at Solutions Review, really in multiple categories. And this is the idea that that tools need to enable line of business folks to be able to start to solve these problems, that IT is becoming overburdened. And really, we're seeing it in BI, we're seeing it in cybersecurity, we're certainly seeing it in process automation. Let's talk a little bit about the need to embrace business with a no-code automation tool. I mean, that's really what we're getting to here. It's really it's simplifying a fairly complex problem or solution for a business user.
Yeah, absolutely. From day one, when we were designing FlowForma, we had that business user in mind. And we built a solution that's really geared towards business users. IT take care of the infrastructure. They're still involved, of course they are. But the idea is that they let the business users take a little bit of control, take a bit of responsibility, build out their solution. And we had to consider this right from the very outset. But one of the key things that we did was we built a solution that actually, or a tool that actually dealt with some key areas that need to be addressed during process automation. Now, that included things like workflow, obviously, so task execution, that kind of thing, but also forms to capture data as the process is executed, and document generation and document management. So we felt that any solution that was going to be used by business users needed to cover all of these areas. So workflow, document generation and management, and forms, and more besides. So we built a very comprehensive system, but we knew that that system wouldn't be picked up by business users unless it delivers results really quickly. So it's very fast to work with. If you're used to using business a software tool, it takes a long time to actually configure lots of components. Well, we have all those components bundled into one with a friendly business user interface. So it's very intuitive and quick and easy to learn. And also, it's implemented on a SaaS model so that it's affordable. You can start small and gradually build over time as you build on your successes.
Well,
and of course,
I'm sorry. Ultimately, that's probably how you're seeing most people engage with FlowForma, and it's certainly what we see is they start out with a particular challenge that they're trying to solve, and they're giving a smaller number of users a bit of a test with a new tool.
Absolutely, yeah. You have to kind of try it out first and try and get users involved and users enthusiastic about the results that you're getting from the tool, and then gradually build on that, and gradually change the culture in your organization so that the business culture is designed so that it will naturally want to automate, and it will look to a tool that people can use it to automate themselves rather than being dependent on IT. That takes time. That's a plan, and you have to start small and gradually grow. But our tool, because it's no code, because it's very business user friendly, because we have support services that support those business users, it helps people get the snowball rolling. And we keep IT happy as well, because we implement, we have tools that allow IT to constrain users' enthusiasm. So when new users are kicking off using the system, they can work away in sandbox areas, and then IT can control it so that they are, when something is good and ready, then it's promoted into production. So basically, IT maintain the guardrails that allow those users to work productively, to work themselves, but not basically to cause any harm to anybody else. So
let's talk about some of the folks that are using FlowForma. I know you've got.
Sure.
You've been at it a while, 200,000 users, and you're really solving problems across every vertical effectively.
Yeah.
Who are some of the companies that you're currently working with?
Well, we have a slide here that shows you just an example of some of the companies. And what you see is, just as you said there, Doug, it's really across all verticals. So we don't specialize in anything. We have a general process automation tool that's very broad. So it's able to cover lots and lots of different user scenarios, use cases. And it's being used effectively by people in finance, like Aon, for example, services, Grant Thornton, construction, Maverick, Reliable Contractors, Inland Rail, energy, Dresser. Really, there's a very wide range of companies that use FlowForma, and it's global as well. So we don't target any one area of the world. We have customers in the States all the way around to New Zealand. So really, it's a very a global solution that operates in lots of different sectors. Sorry.
Well, no, I think what that slide illustrates is really the universal challenge, right? It's a challenge across verticals, across size of companies, and ultimately, it's a challenge that managers really need to embrace. I mean, they've spent the time to think through processes, obviously, and that's what makes a great manager is being able to develop strong business processes. But now it's time to take it to another level, right? That's really one of the drivers, I guess, that we're looking at. So let's talk about that a little bit. The challenges that are facing a company, and the drivers that are kind of universal across, all the companies that you just showed in that logo slide, all the companies from, mid-size up to the largest of the large are facing this sort of need to embrace automation. And I think there's probably a little bit of hesitancy as to how they're going to go about that. And this is, I think, where, a solution like FlowForma really comes in and hits the mark. So let's talk a little bit about some of the drivers.
Yeah, if you look at those drivers, Forrester did some research, and what they noticed was that over 77% of respondents actually had a lot of paper in their organization. A lot of processes were still driven by paper, or initiated by paper, driven by emails, and tracked on spreadsheets. And at the end of the day, first of all, it's a really inefficient way of working. But also, in the current situation with the great lockdown, the pandemic, it's a very difficult way of working when you're working remotely. If you have a piece of paper driving a process, that piece of paper is not a good medium to be, passing around between people when they're working remotely, right? So there's really, Forrester did this research. They noticed 77% of respondents were still utilizing paper-based processes. And for those guys, any paper-based process right now, that's a broken process, because that piece of paper is going nowhere, right? Or it's going nowhere quickly. So what Forrester have identified is there's a real need right now that they need to digitize. And what we've seen universally across the board is a big push towards digital transformation. It's really, the pandemic has been a big kick in terms of getting digital transformation programs moving faster. And while that's been generating a need, it's been driving the need for digitization. And when you look at the tools you have to do that, not all of those tools are able to move quickly. So if you're looking at traditional BPM tools, it takes quite some time to digitize processes and digitize them at scale, because scale is what's needed right now. You need to digitize a lot of those processes quickly. And that's where we come in. Because we offer this alternative approach where you can actually use your business resources, you're not so dependent on IT. You can use those business resources to digitize the processes. And once they're digitized, there's a whole host of benefits that you're going to get. You're going to get benefits from, first of all, ease of access in terms of remote access, but also, because the processes are digitized, you're capturing all the data and metrics in relation to those processes for reporting. So you're generating reporting. You can look at how you're operating remotely, as opposed to how things were working in the office. You can identify where things are being improved, where there's bottlenecks, where there's challenges in the process that didn't exist before because you weren't working remotely. Okay, so as you're working remotely, you can identify those challenges, and then you can address them, make changes to your processes, and see those improvements. So it's really it's the pandemic has come along and changed things very significantly for people, and driven the need for digitalization more than it ever was needed before.
Well, so I want to get us into the pandemic, but before we do that, because we have to talk about the pandemic if we're in any conversation. But we're gonna specifically talk about it with regard to process automation and remote work, which is a huge impact. But before we do that, I want to just bring up a poll that we're going to ask everybody to weigh in on, and that is, what's your most important requirement for a process automation tool? There's 5 answers available for you to pick. We'd love for you to weigh in now with whatever you would like to indicate as your key driver yourself. And Paul, you can see kind of where this is headed.
Absolutely.
It looks like the early indication is our first selection. Do you want to talk a little bit about kind of what you're seeing here? Is this matching what you see with regard to the prospects and clients that you're dealing with?
Yeah, absolutely. When our clients come to us, their first concern tends to be that ability to automate processes in-house. So they've got an overburdened IT department. And again, I know we're going to talk about it later, but the pandemic is kind of causing this, because the pandemic is basically tying up all those IT resources. So they were scarce to begin with, but now they're like hen's teeth, because basically they're so tied up in maintaining that infrastructure and maintaining that remote working in that remote working environment that they don't have time. So, having the ability to automate processes in-house, i.e. use your business developers, use alternative resources to IT. That's really a key thing that we see in our people coming in the door talking to us.
Well, and it's something we're seeing universally across Solutions Review as well. And again, I talked about it earlier, but it really is this idea of democratizing technology so that typical business users who might not have either felt empowered or had the access to the tool, or even maybe felt overwhelmed by some of the tools available, can now use these more advanced, simplified tools. There's maybe a little more horsepower underneath, but the interface and the user experience is simplified so that you can effectively release it to a wider range of users within an organization, and release that, or relieve that burden off of the IT department.
Yeah, certainly the magic is in the end user interface, to make it simple, so that really non-coders can actually configure a system. And that's really what's so important to people, because you'll find that a lot of low-code solutions out there still require some coding. It still requires support from IT. And when there's no IT support available, it runs aground. There's only so much you can do with those systems without getting into coding. Well, with our system, what we've done is we've proven that we can actually build very complex solutions using no code at all. And of course, I'll show you a bit about that in the demonstration. I won't keep going on about it.
well, I think it's interesting, actually, and we'll talk about the pandemic in just a second. But I want to weigh in with regard to kind of remote work, and how we all just scattered as the pandemic hit, and we were kind of released into our own home offices. And truth be told, I mean, we had a similar experience here. I think you lose something when everybody is off remote working. You don't have the same organic collaboration, if you will, and it's really hard to recreate that within a pure remote work environment. You don't get that interaction that happens in the halls and spontaneously at lunch and things of that nature. So I think you're seeing that impact the way organizations can think and evolve and be a little more innovative with regard to how the pandemic is affecting them. So I'm curious about this particular slide because I saw it earlier. I mean, do you want to walk through this a little bit in terms of how COVID-19 has affected strategic thinking?
Yeah, from a strategic perspective, what people are saying is that they've got to digitize. That's number one, and I think that where people have as I was saying earlier, been dependent on paper-based processes and so on, and that's a really big thing. Those paper-based processes got to be replaced. But as well as that, it's a cultural change. Just like you were saying there, Doug, about the fact that people are not used to remote working. They have to find new ways of collaborating together, excuse me. But also, like, they need something to apply some structure to their work so that it aligns their work with the achievement of business goals. At the end of the day, the achievement of business goals keeps you productive, keeps you competitive. So it's all to do with, in my mind, all to do with applying structure to your work so that it can be measured and aligned with those business goals, achieving those business goals. And that's really why I think there's this requirement to accelerate digital transformation, because it's trying to keep structure and organization and productivity in place when everybody is out of the office, right? Remote working. So I think that's a key thing. Also, you'll see the second line there, improving customer experience, because you have to maintain that customer experience even though you're remote working, a very difficult thing to do. So it's trying to do that, and we assist that through process. And we also have this ability to externalize processes and so on, which are suppliers and customers. And working to keep that customer experience high. In when you're remote working, you don't have access to all the tools that you had before. You don't have access to your colleagues as easily. That's quite a challenge. And it really can be helped a lot by digitizing processes, using process as a driver for digital transformation. Why? Because the process is aligned to the business goals aligned to productivity and achieving, keeping your company competitive and achieving results. And it's kind of surprising at the end there that, that regulatory compliance, for example, is not a big deal at the moment in terms of COVID, because basically it's taken a back seat. It's taking a back seat. People need to be productive.
It's nice to have.
It's a nice to have. They need to stay in business. They need to keep their customers, and it's really very much high on the agenda.
Well, it's funny. I think the regulatory enforcement is probably taking a back seat as well.
It is. Everybody's got a little bit like it's a little bit lower priority now than it used to be, right? But that's not to say that it's disappeared either. I mean, you are going to be held to account at some point, so it's better to have that record in place that you can show that you acted properly at the right times and all that.
Well, the fact of the matter is that these problems aren't going away, and as much as we have been dealing with the pandemic, and maybe some things have been pushed to the back burner. This really isn't a problem that's going away, and it needs to be dealt with even during a pandemic. And I think now's as good a time as any to focus on how the world is going to come back to normalcy. And while it may not be quite the same, the problems are still going to exist.
Absolutely, and I think one of the big kind of side effects of digitizing, performing digital transformation, digitizing processes and so on, is that tools like FlowForma have inbuilt audit trails and everything, and you can actually, you can fit that regulatory requirement, or you meet that regulatory need, almost as a byproduct. So when it becomes higher up on the agenda again, as it will when the pandemic ends, you'll actually have solved it already. You'll already have the audit trails and the records, the process controls in place to meet those requirements. So it's low on the agenda right now, but it's a nice side effect of implementing a process automation system that you actually almost kind of automatically start adhering to the regulatory needs and have evidence to show those regulatory bodies when they come calling.
Well, so with regard to what isn't going to change, that is really the evolution of work, right? And the evolution of technology. And what I want to talk about, which I think is again a universal driver, a universal evolution, is this idea of in your particular case, the next slide, the rise of the citizen developer, and really let's get into that, because this is really about providing tools that enable people who haven't necessarily been able to work directly on problems, but really provide direction to an IT department to solve the problem. This is really enabling them to not only solve problems, but be iterative about it, and really work through the digitization over a path that allows them to get better and better and better quicker, without burdening IT. So let's talk a little bit about. I like your next slide.
The next slide. Well, it kind of shows how
this is great stuff.
How things have happened over the years, right? So if you looked at the typical business manager, 20 years ago, they were basically working off paper 90% of the time. And so what were they doing in terms of designing automated systems? Well, not a whole lot. They were basically designing forms, maybe in Microsoft Word, which was around 20 years ago. And they were able to design a form and they were able to email it around the organization. And then, you know what? They got a bit cleverer and they started using spreadsheets. So you'd be using spreadsheets for tracking those processes. Except the problem was, of course, when the paper was being passed around, it was invisible. So it was difficult to actually track anything as you're emailing it around or literally handing it around the organization. But this was the kind of limit of what people could do. So business managers, business supervisors who wanted to take control and manage processes, the tools they had available to them were very limited. Tools that were cleverer did exist. So you did have good BPM systems, of course, but they required an IT department or an external provider to come along and build a solution for you, which took a lot of time. It was expensive. That business manager had to get those requirements exactly right, because if he got them wrong, they have to loop around again, start again, modify it, and so on. It was an expensive, time-consuming process to digitize in the past. So what's happened now is tools have become available that allow those business managers to really build quite sophisticated systems to track and guide people through the execution of a business process, people throughout their organization, not just themselves, not just their team, but everybody in the organization can participate in the process. It can be a simple thing or it can be very complex. And these tools support all of that, all those many complex business scenarios. And you can now configure them without having any particular IT skills. So you don't need to be a coder. You don't even need to have an understanding of how the information almost is stored. You don't really need to know all that detail. You can configure that system completely. In our case, using a forms-based interface, which I'll show you during a demonstration. But really, that's how things have evolved. So where we started off with Word and paper and then moved on to spreadsheets and email chains, and we're now at a place where the citizen developer can actually learn how to use a system in a couple of days and start producing results in a week. And that end result, which, as I say, I'll show you in a demonstration, is really a very sophisticated system. It's a system that's recording the execution of tasks, can be throughout the organization, is recording data, and it's also executing rules that automate the process. So rules that actually send emails, that push and pull data out of back-end systems, that generate documentation automatically. All of that's done within a system that's constructed in the space of 1 to 2 weeks, let's say, by a business resource, not by IT. So really, it's evolved significantly over the past 20 years, and very much so in the past 5 years, that these solutions have become available. Of course, that's all been helped as well by the IT infrastructure improvements that have happened. The proliferation of cloud-based systems, for example, has really made these systems really easy to access. Anybody can access them now through a browser interface, for example. And in our case, we also have mobile apps and Teams app. I'll talk a lot more about those later on. But But yeah, it's really evolved, and it's evolved very rapidly in the past 5 years.
Well, and there, with regard to that last comment, there is actually an Office 365 app that I believe you've made available that is that's, again, it's considering where we all are now. I mean, it's kind of minimum requirements for a solution like this. But I want to just hang on the slide for one more second, because I think the evolution idea here is clever. I think there's also even evolution with regard to that last green screen of the actual tool itself, because as I was saying earlier, this is really the kind of tool that allows a company to not necessarily have to get it right in the first go, right? That it's a very collaborative, iterative technology that allows them to maybe add a little bit after they've seen the process not quite deliver the end result exactly as they predicted. I mean, it's very much like that, right? There's evolution within the tool use itself.
Very much so, very much so. So what I say to people is that, if you can document your process, you can build a solution in FlowForma. You don't need any coding skills. And the thing is, if your documentation is not complete, maybe your documentation is not perfect, it's not accurate, it doesn't matter. You can draft that system very quickly. So you can actually go into the system and draft a solution in a day or 2 days, pass it out then to the business community and get feedback. And then in a very agile manner, go in, make changes, and end up with a solution that actually works in the real environment. Like back in the old days, you'd have to write a specification, send it off to an external party, they'd build a solution, and you know what, nobody would adopt it. But adoption is the key. Adoption is everything. If people don't adopt it, you do not get the results at the end of the day. You do not get the benefit that was promised at the outset when you invested in that system, right? So the whole idea here is that you can invest a small amount of time, get something up and running, get it out to the business community and get that feedback and make a revision very quickly and get the system adopted by the business community that's going to use the system and going to drive the actual benefits at the end of the day. So it's a very different approach now to the traditional way or the old IT way where you had to write the spec and wait 6 months and then you get something and then what doesn't work. So
then to close the loop, right? How do you take that feedback and change it? So let's talk about the technology of that you're going to provide to folks in order to begin that iterative process. So there's lots of talk in our world about low code and no code, but I think you have if you want to take a moment and kind of explain the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There is a big difference. So there's lots of solutions out there that are low code. And what that means is that you can achieve a certain amount, but once you get to that certain level, to increase the complexity in the solution, you got to start coding. Now, the problem for a business developer is that they don't know how to code. It's going to take them too long to learn how to code. And if you start coding, it's a very exact kind of scientific thing that you got to do. And you know what? It's going to take you a long time to learn, but you have to introduce procedures to check the code to make sure the code works. And let me tell you, that takes a long time. So anytime you've got to resort to code at all, it's increasing the time that it's going to take. And most likely, it's something that you're not going to be able to do yourself. You're going to have to involve IT resources. As soon as you involve IT resources, you get into that whole cycle of how they're going to pay for them. How are you going to cover those resources? Where are the resources going to come from? How are you going to, as I say, budget for them and so on? So the whole thing becomes a lot more complex when you involve even a small amount of code. And that's why no-code systems exist. No-code systems don't have any code in them. There's nothing complex to learn. And you can actually configure them entirely yourself. So you're not dependent on the external resource to do that for you. And I think that's critical because in terms of project delivery, if you talk about IT projects, my own background is in IT. I've been at it way too long. And and certainly like in my own background, I used to deliver IT projects, and you have all sorts of holdups because you've got so many resources that you got to have to work together to deliver a system. You have developers, coding developers, and then you have test system people and so on. There's a lot of resources involved in delivering traditional IT projects using a coding approach. If you use a no-code approach, the idea is that you can do it all yourself. And with tools like FlowForma, we've integrated the different aspects of the system into one kind of single user interface for configuration. I'm going to show it to you later on.
Well,
and
I want to do a quick time check because I know the demo is very compelling, and I want to make sure we have plenty of time for that. So if we can just move along to the key processes that people should be thinking about and that are being automated by folks. The idea here is to enable citizen developers within these organizations. Let's talk a little bit about the processes that you're finding that people are tackling briefly, because I do want to. I know we want to talk a little bit about a couple of success stories, and then we want to get to the demo. So
sure.
So let's talk a little bit about those where you're seeing folks using FlowForma.
So we're seeing people using it in a very wide array of different processes. It's a generic process tool. So not surprisingly, there's a lot of processes on this slide. But what we can see here is that pretty much across the board, they're being used. So you can have simpler processes, which are very relevant right now, like return to work, for example. That can be thrown together very quickly. But there's lots of other processes, for example, project management, onboarding processes for clients, for employees, for contractors, and health and safety in terms of incident management. So there's lots of different processes that our tool is being used for. But these processes are quite common across all organizations. If you look at this list, for example, you'll see things like change management, very common process, purchase requisitions. These are processes that are very common and often, by the way, missing from those key critical back-end systems that you have. So in often cases, you'll have a HR system or an ERP system, for example, that's missing a process engine, or it may be missing certain aspects of automation. And FlowForma can sit on top of that and add that automation in here. And that's where you'll see a lot of these processes, like travel management, for example, is often missing out of an ERP system, and yet it's quite an essential process.
So I want to take a moment and do another quick poll. So we have another poll that we're going to bring up, which would be, what would success look like for automating your processes? And again, we have 5 selections. Would love to get everybody to weigh in on that and see kind of where everybody's feeling success might look like, where they might find it. And what are you seeing here, Paul? It looks like it's going to be a photo finish.
So for me, the old increased efficiency and productivity tends to always be near the top, because it's a traditional driver for BPM systems, for process automation, and absolutely is a benefit that you're going to get. Like for what we see, if you're digitizing a paper-based process or a spreadsheet-based process, you're going to get a 50% at least increase in productivity. So why not take it? So we would see that as being a key one. Also, the fact that you're capturing data automatically. Everybody is talking about data these days. It's all about analytics, and capturing that data means you've got that data you can analyze. You can analyze and improve your processes overall. So we feel that capturing all that data really helps in terms of identifying things like bottlenecks and so on. Also helps in terms of making your decision making better. And I notice here that the culture of continuous process improvement is in second place. I'm personally really pleased to see that, because it is a cultural change that you're doing here. If you're transferring the control over your processes to those business developers, it's a cultural change that's really going to make a difference. And I think now during the pandemic, more than any other time, with the tools available like FlowForma, there's a real drive to actually have those business people take control and digitize the process themselves. So it's really pleasing to see that that's very high on people's priorities.
Well, and I think it does speak again to this idea that people recognize that that a tool like this is going to enable that continuous improvement. That's the idea here, is that it's not so kind of singular in its implementation. So let's talk about success very briefly, because again, I'm being sensitive to time. We have about 15 minutes, and we have a few success stories here. But
Sure.
Is there one that you can pick out that you're particularly proud of, so that we can kind of get over to the demo before too long?
Sure. So I'm going to very, very quickly go through a couple very quickly. This was a great success story, still is a great success story. Beaumont Hospital, an institution that's very paper dependent, or at least it was very paper dependent until they introduced FlowForma, digitized an extremely high number of processes, used the white coats, the clinicians, to actually digitize the processes themselves, which was a fantastic achievement. And they cut out 900,000 pieces of paper that they were generating every year. Really significant saving, and a fantastic sustainability message as well, and that that they're not cutting down so many trees. So really was a fantastic result, and a standout result in Ireland, which was where this hospital is located. And also a great improvement on patient experience, I should add, by making the processes run efficiently. For time's sake, I'm just going to quickly move on. So in terms of the Tideway Tunnel, it's a massive civil engineering project, and they are just going to cut down to the bottom line there. They saved 700 hours of repetitive tasks in the first year of operations. Amazing. So that's only digitizing 10 processes. So it's a significant saving that they realized. And of course, they were able to measure that because they're capturing all the metrics of the processes. And it's really got the snowball rolling, and they've a long list of processes that they want to digitize. They're making heavy use, by the way, of a mobile product where they're using mobile processes while they're on site. And then very quickly, we have another customer here, a college, who measured their savings, and just on one process alone, trips and visit process, they saved 1,665 hours. It's really significant savings. And again, they're able to quantify all of this because they've now got the metrics, because they're capturing all the process performance as they're carrying out the processes. So it's really good in that they can actually capture these details and refine those processes and make even larger savings in the future. So there's a quick whistle-stop tour of some customer examples.
Well done. Well done. Again, on our way to the demo, just one of the things that I wanted to just go through real quick is what a team begins to look like. Who gets involved in this sort of thing? Yeah. Who are the folks that may be part of an implementation, or certainly the end users of process automation?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting to see here who do you need to get involved. So if you're kicking off a process of having citizen developers build out the processes, who do you need to be involved and to take ownership of that program? Well, you need a business expert. Obviously, you need business people to actually be willing to change and want to change and want to improve. And that's the key thing. So business has to be bought in. You also then have to have the IT department or somebody within the IT department to accept that you're going to let those business developers free, right? Let them go and develop those processes, and you need a person who's happy to take ownership of that from an IT perspective, from an infrastructure perspective, who's going to help manage that environment, right? And then you typically need an executive sponsor. Why do you need an executive sponsor? Because it's a cultural change thing. It's a big deal. So if you're going to switch around to to not using IT to deliver all your systems. Actually, the business people are going to do it themselves. You need an executive sponsor to accept that, and also to push and promote that within the organization. So you need the champion, and that's so important. We find that you have to have these three people, individuals typically, aligned within the organization before you're going to have success with a system development program. So we find that that's a critical thing, that we, like when we go to sell FlowForma into an organization, we look to at least have one of these people on board, and then get all three of the people on board over time, because I think that's a key thing for success.
And so, quickly to summarize the digitizing of demand, you're really talking about. You're talking about a cultural shift. You're talking about providing tools to the right people within the right lines of business within an organization, who the ones who are going to create the most efficiencies from a tool like this. And then ultimately, when you're trying to shift that culture, you really are looking for champions, right? And those are the folks that contact you, and then you help them develop a story, develop a case, a business case, and really present the solution to the higher ups within the organization to explain where the efficiencies are going to come from.
That's absolutely right. We help people sell and promote the whole idea inside their own organizations. So yeah, indeed, that's a key thing. We have to find that champion, and then we help that champion sell the idea. And then when anybody becomes a FlowForma customer, the support is ongoing. So we actually provide services that actually support you. They will train you up to become self-sufficient and support you in promoting FlowForma within the organization. It's in everybody's interest, I guess, for FlowForma to be successful. And we very much take that on board.
Well, Paul, I'm going to ask you to jump to the demo. We have about 10 minutes to go. Sure. I know there are a couple slides we will come back to, but I do want to make sure we show folks the inner workings of FlowForma, because it's really quite compelling, and the idea of no code, I think, will become very evident as they start to see how it functions within the demo.
Sure. So let me first say that FlowForma is a web-enabled system, fully web-enabled system, and you access it via a browser. But we have other access points as well. So this is the browser access point, for example. If I were to jump over to Teams, you'd also see a similar kind of interface where you're seeing the same kind of dashboard. That's Microsoft Teams, but you can collaborate in Teams without leaving Teams and still access the system. We also have a mobile interface, mobile apps for iOS and Android. So again, you can access the system in any way that you need to. And we've done this specifically during COVID to promote access to the system while remote working. Also works very well in environments where resources are working remotely. Let's say, for example, in construction environment where you have construction workers on construction sites. And you access the system, as I say, typically via a browser. And the way you would initiate a process is you would click on a link. This is, by the way, is our default landing page. And when you click on the link, a form opens up. So our solution is a form-based workflow solution. And what you're seeing in our form design is you have a thing called a step bar at the top here, and this shows you all the steps in the process. And you can see that the current step is highlighted. We're on the very first step here, new hire details. This is, by the way, is an employee onboarding process. And what we're going to do then is enter in some data. The data down here is a dynamic electronic form, and it represents the data that needs to be captured before this step can be completed. Right now, there's all sorts of data controls as well. You can make fields mandatory, and you perform all sorts of data validations. You can also include lots of different types of data in here. So these are simple text fields, but you can include information like here we have a username that must be entered. Here we have some drop-down boxes and so on. All, I guess, standard stuff. But we include additional types as well. Like, for example, you can capture the GPS location of your device represented on a map, include that in the form. You can capture tabular information. We support lots and lots of different data types. And we've done that because the real world is complicated, and you need to be able to support lots of different capture lots of different types of data. Now, the key thing here is that as you move through these steps, sorry, I should say at the very bottom of the form, you have a submit button. And when you click submit, that moves you on to the next logical step in the process. All the steps then execute sequentially. Each of these steps is assigned to a resource, and only that resource can actually go in and complete that step. So let's say Paul Stone was assigned to a manager review. Only Paul Stone would be able to go in and complete that manager review. And all of this is dynamic. So as you're moving through this, the step bar is a simple representation designed for the end user to quickly see where they are in the process, whether they're on the first step, in the middle, or at the end. And they can see all the data that was entered previously as well. And as they're moving through the process, as I say, the highlighted step moves them on. But the system is dynamic. So the resources assigned to the steps are dynamic, and you can dynamically, as you're capturing data, change those resource assignments so different people do different steps every time you execute the workflow. As well as that, the steps themselves can change. So you can branch the workflow so that new steps are brought in or steps are removed. And also you can have steps working in parallel. So there's a fully functioning workflow engine in the background that's allowing you to implement complex workflows. But the end user always sees that nice simple view, and it means that it's very easy for them to use, it's very easy to adopt. Now, all processes that you implement in FlowForma actually look very similar. So if I click over here to a field change request, totally different process, but again, the same kind of user interface comes across. So you're seeing a step bar, you're seeing your fields, and what this means is that it's very easy to use, no matter what process you're using it for. Same kind of interface, same kind of navigation. Now, you can, of course, make the forms look different. You can brand them and all that kind of thing to make it easier, at the end of the day, easier for the end user to adopt. You can also include messages and graphics and so on inside the form that you can make appear, disappear, etc. So you can guide the user through the process. So it's really the form interface has been designed to be as easy to use as possible. Now, just to say on top of that, then, if you want to see work lists, we have this ability to create work lists very quickly and easily so that you can see lists of forms that are, let's say, awaiting your input, or maybe in this case, completed. And you can see all the detail that was captured during the form, etc. So you can create work lists and so on very quickly and easily. But we actually have an advanced solution that allows you to see even more detail if needed in a kind of a dashboard view of the system. Let me select that for you there. So for example, this dashboard is also accessing FlowForma. As you can see, it looks very different. It's quite sophisticated. In this case, it's showing you all processes related to a business area, customer onboarding. And I can kick off processes by clicking on these tiles. I can see my work lists. I can also see my various views of the data. So I can see a kind of a helicopter view of all the onboarding processes and what processes are in what status, etc. So this gives you this more sophisticated dashboarding functionality that's also built into the FlowForma system. But I guess one of the things that people would really like to see is what does it look like from a configuration perspective. So let me jump in there and show you what a process looks like. I'm going to take a very straightforward process, a field change request. And that's the simple one that we looked at earlier on. And this is what a process looks like. Now, straight away, you'll see that it's a workflow system, but you're not looking at a flow chart. And people are so focused in on flow charts and swim lane diagrams in terms of workflow. Actually, if you think about it, if you started off with a flow chart and you wanted to build a system, you're just at the very beginning. So a flow chart on its own is not sufficient to actually build a working system that can be adopted by end users. Now, if you've got a business developer, the business developer's goal is not to have a flow chart, it's to get a working system and get it in the hands of the developer, getting a generating return, right? So we've built a tool called a Flow Designer that lets you see all the steps in a process, add in steps and so on, and also add in data items, we call them questions, on each of the steps, and then add in business rules that carry out actions. So the business rule might, for example, assign a step to somebody. So this interface here integrates the workflow, and the data and all the rules, the automation elements into one single user interface. And it's all forms based. So if I want to add a new step into this process, I just click on plus step. I type in the name of the step. I press save. It automatically gets added into the end of the workflow. Excuse my typing errors there. And then I can drag it up to the appropriate execution point. Then I can click on the step and I can add in a question. A question is just a piece of data that you want to capture. And in this case, I want to capture the category. And I'm going to pick this the type of data that I want to capture. Well, at the moment, it's set as a single line of text, a small piece of text, but I'm going to change it to a choice value. And I can type in the categories here. You'll notice how I'm using a forms interface to configure the system, and the form is dynamic. So when I changed the question type to choice, it automatically changed the fields below to enter relevant details. I can also change it to something else. I just want to show you here the wide variety of data types that we capture. So there's lots of different types, including interesting ones like wet signature that's used on mobile devices for capturing literally a handwritten signature, or barcodes. The system can automatically generate barcodes and place them on documentation and so on. And we've lots of interesting question types. I will not go through them all. You'll be pleased to know it will take far too long. So let's leave it there at choice 1, 2, 3, and I'll have it as a radio button and press save. And now that question is automatically going to be captured in the approval step. Now, the other thing that the system does is it executes business rules. Now, again, we've got lots of business rules. So I'm just going to show you one. That's step assigned to business rule, for example. That's the one that dynamically assigns those workflow steps. And the way our business rules work is you can put in a condition. So you can say, for example, if the category equals 1, then I want to assign a step to a person. So I'm going to pick the step I want to assign. I'm going to assign the site engineer approval, and I'm going to say a person or group defined in a question. And this is the question I'm going to pick. So who's going to classify this FCR? So whatever the person types in while they're filling in the form, whatever name they type in there, that's the person that's going to now be assigned to do the site engineer approval step. And that's how our business rules work. So it's an automatic action, and it's completed by filling in this form, pressing save. It's automatically triggered now when that step completes. And all of our business rules work the same way. So we have business rules for communications, like sending emails, generating documents, integrating with backend systems, like HubSpot, for example, or SQL Store procedures. But every business rule is an electronic form that you're filling in. Let me just open one very, very quickly to show you that. Show you what I mean. So this one is to send an email, but again, what you see straight away is the same kind of configuration. You've got a condition up there, same configuration editor, and then you have this emailing action, right? And with the email action, you can have a template. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail here, but we've got a comprehensive emailing system in the background to send email notifications, timed email notifications, and so on. The other thing about it is as well, I mentioned that it does workflow, it does data collection, which we're showing you here, but also it does document generation and management. So the system actually sits on top of SharePoint, and it uses SharePoint like a content database. And the big benefit of that is that you leverage all that fantastic document management features of SharePoint, and you can restrict permissions on documents, all that kind of stuff. But we also have this rather neat document generation feature. It's kind of my favorite part of the system because it uses Microsoft Word. So you can use a Word template. You may already have one. And then what we've done is we built a plugin for Microsoft Word that lets you merge in the data from the actual form itself automatically into Word. And then you can generate that as a PDF. You can generate it as a docx, stick a draft watermark on it. You know, at a certain approval stage in the workflow, you want to take the draft mark off and then convert it into a PDF. So it has all this functionality for document generation management as well. And with that workflow, data, and document management, that's typically what the business needs to actually implement the system. It's not good enough to have a task management system. It's not good enough to have a form system. You actually need something that does all three of these things to actually deliver a solution that people are going to use, adopt, and where you're going to gain the benefits from.
Do you mind if I jump back in?
Not at all. Go ahead.
I was glad to see the integration with Teams, actually. because it did address a little bit of what we were talking about earlier with regard to a remote workforce and integrating collaboration tools into the FlowForma solution. So that, along with the documentation through SharePoint and all of the other integrations, you know, in addition to its ease of use, I think you've really done a good job of making it as collaborative as possible, which I would say is notable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in a short kind of 10-minute demonstration, I can only skim the surface of what it can do, but it provides really a lot of tools in terms of, you know, the ability to access the system is very straightforward. As you say, we've got that Teams app, so you can literally be on the Teams call and also be filling in a FlowForma form or completing a FlowForma process at the same time. Yeah, it really helps in that area. Also, can I just say as well, what we haven't had time to look at it today, but we've also got a thing called a governance app that lets you basically, you know, I was talking earlier on about IT being able to deploy sandbox environments where those business developers can play around with processes, pass them out to their colleagues, get feedback and so on, and then move it on into production. So that basically you have an IT person at the center of that who's controlling and protecting those production environments. So we've kind of started off, when we first started off on the market, we were just like a business developer, kind of a departmental solution. And what we've done is we've now moved it on to an enterprise class solution where larger enterprises are adopting it at a large scale to digitize processes across the whole organization.
Well, and I think you're seeing that with large organizations in Office 365 as well. And I think there's, yeah, I think you're spot on in terms of where you've built the solution and ultimately where it's going to be adopted. So nicely done. I know we're running over, and I apologize for folks who have other commitments at the top of the hour, but I do want to talk a little bit about just some of the questions that we've gotten and just a couple of other questions that I have with regard to how best to engage. So first off, we did have a specific question around capturing KPIs for the processes automated by citizen developers. How is that done?
Yeah, let me just jump back into the demo very quickly. I didn't have time to cover it, but we actually capture metrics on every process. So we have a process performance section here that shows you processes that are running late and running on time and so on. This is dynamic so that you can see right now what processes are running late. You can also dig into the detail and actually look at a step analysis. What does that mean? You're looking at the actual steps executed over time and which steps are running fast, which steps are running late. And you can see basically a breakdown. Oh, well, actually, hey, I might have a bottleneck here on step number 2, employee manager review. And let's have a look at the detail of those processes that were delayed. So you can just click on the bar and it shows you those processes. You can dig into the detail and find out why that bottleneck was occurring. So it's capturing all that detail in the background. We have this process performance feature built into it. And in addition to that, all that data that you're capturing, all the metrics and all the data captured in those forms is available for reporting through tools like Power BI. So here we have Power BI running against that FlowForma database. And what you're seeing here is, obviously it's a much more complex site. There's lots of processes in the site, but you're seeing a breakdown of all the forms that are being created by flow and by template, if you like, and all the processes by step and so on. So all that detailed information is stored in the background and it's available for reporting. And that's one of the big benefits out of this system, because you did not have that before. If you had a manual process, you just weren't capturing the detail. Hell, if you even had a BPM process, like a BPM system typically captures task details. It doesn't capture all the data of the fields, all the data of the documents and so on. So now you have that detail and you can report on it very easily.
So another question from me, technical requirements. What are the technical requirements for for using a FlowForma process automation tool?
Yeah, there's only one prerequisite. So we at the moment use SharePoint as a content database, and that's SharePoint Online. So you have to have SharePoint Online to start. And FlowForma installs as a SharePoint add-in into your SharePoint Online environment. Now, if you look back, say 3 years, that would be a problem for some people. But today, you find that SharePoint Online is in almost every Microsoft 365 package. And part of the reason for that is because it underlies Microsoft Teams. A lot of people don't realize this. But if you have Microsoft Teams, you have SharePoint Online. So SharePoint Online is our only technical prerequisite. And beyond that, you just need a browser. And you can access it, as I say, via a browser, whether it's Edge, Chrome, Safari, and so on. And you can access it via mobile apps. We have mobile apps that we freely distribute. So if you have a FlowForma license, you can use it on mobile. And by the way, any processes that you develop on the desktop, they're instantly available on mobile. Also, the Teams app as well is also free. Again, it just links into your main SharePoint instance, and it gives you access to your processes.
Say somebody has something already in existence, as is often the case, right? There's legacy systems, or there may be an existing solution that requires some integration. I saw briefly a drop down of some of the integrations that you've done.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how you work with existing solutions and
Absolutely.
and how you work through that?
Yeah. I whizzed through that little integration section there, but there's a lot to talk about. I'll try and keep it brief. So we integrate with lots of things. First of all, of course, we integrate with SharePoint. SharePoint's kind of native to us, but we also integrate with things like SQL Server, Azure SQL. So we can push and pull information out of Azure SQL, which is often used as a staging area if you're integrating into a large enterprise. But we also then integrate with specific apps as well. One of my own favorite integration methods is using a thing called Microsoft Logic Apps. Microsoft Logic Apps is an integration layer that supports over 200 applications, and we talk to Logic Apps. So you can pass data to and from Logic Apps, and then it passes on to other backend systems, including quite sophisticated, like it will talk to Oracle, talk to DB2, but it will also talk to, for example, SAP. So there's lots of integration options using the Logic Apps route. And then beyond that, if your backend system supports web services, we can talk to it. So we can integrate the application with API calls to web services in the background as well.
Well, so to wrap up, the biggest question that I would have after seeing this is how does one begin an engagement and literally to trial even to see whether or not FlowForma is going to bring the efficiencies that we just went through. What's the best way for them to begin an engagement?
Yeah, the best way to do that, I think, is to contact us via our website. I think I might have some links here at the end of the presentation. But you can basically book a call with one of our automation experts, request a trial, and we'll set you up with a trial, and we'll guide you through that trial, so that you can see how the system operates. You can even try it in your own environment. So our app is available on the Office 365 store. And you can download the app into your own SharePoint environment and try it out in your native environment there. But we also offer this additional option of a proof of concept. So if you want to see how FlowForma would operate specifically in one specific scenario in your organization, we can build you a simple proof of concept that shows you that. It helps sometimes when you're internally selling it in your organization and you want something that everybody can quick and easily relate to. So yeah, we're happy to support that as well. So yeah, getting up and running on a trial on FlowForma is very, very straightforward.
And so what, just one more last question.
Yeah.
What advice would you provide to somebody as they're thinking of making that next step? I mean, should they have a few things in mind before they reach out?
Yes, they should. So what we always say is that you have to have, we really recommend that you have at least one scenario, preferably 3 scenarios, where process automation would make a difference. So it's good to have a specific scenario where that's the case. And it's good as well to have made some attempt at documenting that scenario. So if you can describe that scenario in a document, it doesn't have to be very detailed. That really is a great place to start, because once you have that, you can very quickly build that first draft proof of concept in FlowForma to be able to show that to interested parties in your organization and sell it internally. So we really feel that that's a key preparatory step that you have some idea where it's going to make a difference. What process is very obvious in your organization and obvious to you and obvious to other people, where it's going to make a significant difference to have that process digitized.
Outstanding. Paul Stone, I want to thank you very much for sharing so much. We went through a lot.
A lot there, yeah.
I know there's a lot that you'd like to show, and so we would certainly encourage everybody to reach out and engage FlowForma with that advice in mind, and see whether or not this is a solution that's going to help you as you go through this digital transformation. So, Paul, well done, and thanks very much.
Very welcome, Doug.
You bet. And there you have it, another solution in our spotlight. We want to thank FlowForma and Paul Stone for being a part of this solution spotlight, and would encourage you to go to flowforma.com and check out all that they have to offer with regard to business process automation. And we would encourage you to go to Solutions Review and check out everything that we're writing about with regard to business process management on our BPM site. I want to thank you very much for being a part of this live event, and we look forward to doing more solution spotlights in the future. Thanks.